Howdys and salutations, y'all. Let's give this another go. Welcome to the next part of our Frieren style study. Apologies for the voice, I'm a little raspy, caught a bit of a bug over the holidays. But we're back at it. We'll be doing a short stream today, partly because this is actually an hour late start due to a number of technical problems, and also partly because I don't need to wear out my voice anyway, so I was really planning an hour stream anyway, so it kind of works out. So, style studies. Let's jump right into this. And by jump right into this, I of course mean the long-winded explanation. I'm kidding. Mostly. Apologies for the coughs too. I'll try to keep those away from the mic. But this style study, this concept of a style study, basically is much like a master study, like one would do of Michelangelo or some of the traditional Renaissance greats or the ancient classic greats, or different cultures, of course, have their own greats and everything. Regardless, you're studying a style to try to figure out what makes it tick. Not just to figure out how to mimic it precisely. That's actually, I would argue, much easier to do. There's lots of ways to mimic art precisely, even without modern tools. There's the old grid method where you can draw a grid over the actual original and then over your canvas, and then just line up like, okay, section A2 has these lines in it, done. Section B7 has these lines, done. And you can do it in any order and you'll get the finished thing. You could just look directly at it and copy exactly, but I feel like you kind of miss out a little bit on that too. Not to say that it isn't worth doing, like there's absolutely merit to that, but if you really want to understand why it ticks, you really need to think about it as you're going. And so that's what we try to do with these little style study streams. And today we are doing Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Now, there will be no spoilers. I make sure that all of our reference images are spoiler free. I will not talk about any spoilers in the series. All of these images are from Volume 4, solely because that's the one that I have, but there's no story, any information will be contained. Because I know some people don't like spoilers, personally they don't bother me, but I know some people really dislike them, and I don't want to taint this series, especially such a wonderful series as Frieren. No reason to taint that for someone when they should really be checking it out. So, yeah, I apologize, I'm a little croaky. It was bad enough before all the tech issues, but we will keep on plugging on, and we will... I just keep on going. Tomorrow will be a new stream, and beyond that will be new streams. That said, I will say, unfortunately, I feel like I end every break by saying this. The next couple weeks might be shaky. In this case, mixing up our schedule rather than totally messing with it. Let me pull up our reference here while I talk, because we're going to start with Fern, because Fern is cool. And also, not too bad of a reference to work off of. So, schedule might be changing in the future because I am working on getting a new living situation, which should be fun and exciting. My current one's fine, but I'm found an opportunity, and so that'll be mixing things up a bit. But it also means that my schedule might change a bit too. So keep an eye out for that over the coming weeks. I don't know if that'll hit. It may be the first week of February, it might be sooner. It depends on, a number of factors, really. But I'm sure most of y'all aren't here for my backstory. Y'all are here to learn because you like Frieren and you want to know why the art works, or maybe you want to do some fan art of your own. So, or you want to draw your own OCs in the Frieren style. There's a million valid reasons. So let's look at this. Let's look at what's happening with Frieren's art. We've done some backgrounds in previous streams. You're welcome to go check those out if you want. We've got all the VODs on YouTube. Even VODs I really wish we didn't. Like, I've kept all of them from day one. But such is the way. So let's see for faces, though, not just landscapes, because Frieren's got interesting landscapes, but I feel like they're not really necessarily anything to write home about. They're functional, they're good, don't get me wrong, but they're not extraordinarily interesting, except to think about the technique for how to make a landscape that supports your characters without taking away from them, and how to make one without burning 1,000 hours on it. So there's absolutely merit in studying them, but I wouldn't say that they're artistically interesting, particularly, most of the time. And look, I don't mean that as like a I could do better kind of thing, of course not. I think they serve the story very well, because the landscapes are not the focal point of Frieren's story. The characters are. And the character style really shines. It's very different from our previous series with Witch Hat Atelier, which also has wonderful character design, don't get me wrong, but it's a very different style. This one, you will witness a lot of very fine line weights. To the point where I've been practicing with physical media with my like 0.05 microns, and even they're struggling to actually get some of these lines. So, if you're the sort who really likes constructing faces, you're certainly welcome to whatever method you like best. I know a lot of people like the Proco methods and some of the Loomis heads, and these will map fairly well to those. Anime proportions don't always map one-to-one, as you will certainly encounter if you've ever tried to do this fan art before. But, or any fan art, or even drawn enough real people, they don't always map one-to-one. But it's a good starting point. However, I like to take an approach that is much more aggressively focused on sort of looking at the proportions of the specific reference we're looking at, because we're trying to figure out what makes it tick. Not just literally how to render it, although, again, understanding the structure behind it is a useful part of both. But what are the stylistic parts that make this tick? So I'm going to just get some rough lines in here. And as I always say, the size of your first line doesn't matter. It's all the lines that come after it that do. Because one line can be any size, but every other line has to be proportional to it. So let me see if we can't get just a loose outline of the face. I find that that is actually where most of my drawings seem to have the biggest struggles, personally. It's something that I continue to study and work on. And building off of proportional guides like Loomis are a good place to work on that. Okay, I'm not too worried about the shape though right now. We're going to focus on the style in just a second. 1, I would hazard a guess, roughly 3, slight slope. And then angled, roughly same distance, but only halfway up. There we go. Because the main lines that we're going to see here is we've got the face silhouette. You'll notice not a lot of detail on nose and mouth. That is common for Frieren and a lot of anime. For any of the younger characters, and for Frieren herself, there tends to be very low mouth and nose detail. I will say open mouths actually have a little more detail in this than I've seen in some manga. And we'll get to that on other references. It's not so relevant here. But, as might be expected, a lot of the style and expression comes through in the eyes, and in subtle, well, the eyes and the hair, and then very subtle rest of the expression. So, let's see. We've got sort of a hair borderline here. I'm just trying to look at, rather than thinking of it as part of the head, I'm just trying to look at the shape of the face here. So this one comes up to almost the same height as this one. It's just a hair shy, like it's very close. And then we've got this very gentle, rough arc. None of those were the correct arc. There we go. We could even curve it a little more. There we go. So you can see that this already roughly matches the face shape. And then, of course, the hair will have its own piece here in just a second. Because the hair has a couple of different key component shapes here. And you'll notice that these key component shapes, in Witch Hat we saw that oftentimes silhouette borders were very heavy lines, made for high contrast. You won't see that nearly as much in Frieren. There's a little bit, you can see the shadow under the chin gives contrast, and like some of these hair component shapes, as I'm going to call them, you'll encounter them a bit. Let's see. This one ultimately continues up, roughly 2/3 of face height, and then the secondary strand continues up the same amount from like here to here, up again. So we'll start here, and it's almost with it, arcs, but it ultimately arcs down and doesn't meet with it until below this line of the side of the face and the chin and jaw. Continues down slightly more than the face height component here. And then we've got this one meeting at roughly the same height, very narrow at the top, straight edge down, and so on. So this is one of our hair chunks, and you see this in a lot of, well, many different art styles, but especially with manga and anime art styles, they're very clear. And with Fern, that's no exception. And so you can see that this chunk here is a little more silhouetted, more clearly defined. Like we've got a solid line here that You'll note this in Frieren style. It's not necessarily the outermost line. Sometimes there's some stray hairs outside of it, but it will be one along the edge of these hair chunks. Not necessarily the direct edge, but parallel with it. And it merges in. One of the big things when you're trying to pick up a style, obviously, like, shape is important, but line weight carries so much, well, weight in a style. It really makes a big impact. Line style does too. I'm using fineliners in this case. The YouTube description will have the exact ones that I'm using. Because Frieren style, even the heavy lines are very light. Like, these lines that we're doing here to give it emphasis, I'm only using, size 10 right now on a very large canvas. Pardon about that. We're not dealing with extraordinarily heavy lines here. You still need to pay attention to the line variance because it matters. Like, it's not like every line is the same weight. Otherwise, these detail lines would become a little overpowering. But you'll find that there's often just very, very faint little lines in here that are giving the details. A little extra there. And continuing these up. So you can sort of see, like, and you'll notice this on a lot of the hair chunks, especially along the bangs, is you'll have your chunk. Let's say we've got this one. It'll have, like, you'll have a stray strand on one or both edges of it. This is not unique to Frieren style, by the way, but you'll see it in a lot of bangs, and it's worth thinking about. I believe even Teleperta's old animation techniques talked about this as a method. So you get loose bangs on one or both sides. You get, like, this flat section in the middle, and then one or two strands emphasized maybe along the outer edges, really not so much in the middle. So it makes these side ones look like independent hairs, gives a little texture without making it a complete visual blur of just hairlines everywhere. And you'll notice this throughout a lot of styles, but especially in Frieren. You'll notice these sort of clusters of hair detail lines. Like, rather, you won't see crazy detail, because that would end up looking messy and not translate well to print manga anyway. But you will see these sort of sections where there's a couple of hairs to indicate the direction that that particular part of the hair is moving. So, like, let's actually look at this one for an example. Widthwise, it's not a huge chunk of this. We've got this here, and you'll notice that even though I call this one chunk, like, it's not exactly parallel on this line. Like, there's a little variance. This one has a little swoop to it. It's got a couple of lines up there. Vertical ones going in opposite directions. And then this last little piece of it isn't exactly continuous. It's a slightly different angle, and it's slightly longer. It really is its own strand of hair. And you may not think that's an important detail now, but breaking up this line so that it doesn't look completely continuous is important. The artists are doing that intentionally. It makes it look more natural and less constructed. And you probably wouldn't ever notice it if you weren't looking, but if you do it wrong, everyone will notice. And I hate to say wrong, because there's styles that can use that. You can use those intentional pieces. I only say wrong in this case because it does not match sort of the study we're actually trying to do. But I would also say with these style studies, never... Obviously, if your goal is to draw, like, very specific fan art, or, like, OCs in the style, or replicating it, or, I don't know, applying for a job with this animation studio or some such to match it later on, like, definitely you need to stay focused. But if you're just looking at it because you like the style and you're trying to find things that you like, don't let the rules of the style suffocate your creativity. If you find some other thing that you're toying with, like you're following the style and then you kind of get on a tangent, lean into the tangent and don't lean into my voice. Holy moly. Well. Such is the way of things. We'll keep on plugging. Probably should have done a like a Stardew Valley stream or a My Sim stream today. Because then y'all could listen to the game sound effects at least. But, sorry. Here we are. Okay, so I probably made those just a hair narrow. Ha ha ha. Terrible puns are my speciality. See, once again, we've got this big chunk and then single stray strand. And then between these chunks, you get the slightly more defined lines that also cut further into the hair. Partly because it implies a wider gap, so it makes sense that the gap between the chunks would be wider so that they're actually visually separate. Gives the hair a little more texture. You'll notice that you don't want these to be exactly symmetrical. I probably made that one. This needs to be a little more narrow. And you don't want them to be exactly parallel. Let's see. They need to follow the curve of the head, and they need to not look like they're just copy and pasted over. Every single one of these chunks has a slightly different shape to it, even if they're very similar. Once again, if you get too identical of a rhythm going on something like this, it will become very obvious even to non-artists and like just even to people who aren't looking for it. It'll just become clear that it's like, oh, something feels off about that. All right, I'm going to toss our original guideline now. And we've got some pretty decent bangs here. Obviously not perfect, but workable. These are plausible. And you can see in some places they do line up fairly close. It's just not everywhere. You can allow some amount of those patterns just so long as it's not becoming a rhythm, aka a pattern throughout the whole piece. So before I do the next chunk of the hair, because actually in this reference image you can't see it. Generally speaking, I think in 3/4 views, okay, yeah. So this will continue over. So this is sort of our middle section. Okay, yeah. Then we don't quite get to see the full arc at the top of this one. So I want to, going back to the everything needs to be proportional to the original line, I want to make sure that I've got a useful proportional reference when we're way out here, because that's pretty distant from our initial section here. So I'm going to use the ear for that. And you'll notice this is a very interesting stylistic choice in Frieren. A lot of the ears across characters are very angular. And I don't mean that they're literally like a box, even though Frierens are, you know, triangles. It's not what I mean either. But you'll notice the bottom edge of this ear lines up exactly with the jaw, and it is basically a straight line. There is a very slight rounded edge as it approaches a corner, a very slight bevel, but it is, as far as ear drawing styles go, it's actually pretty rigid. And height-wise, it is, in this case, only coming up to about the edge of the eye / the bangs here. It starts to arc back up, only comes up to about the height of the taller bangs. I'm actually going to move that over here because there's not very... It's a larger section on this direction than it is this way, so I need to maintain that from our reference. And like these are almost 90-degree angles, even with the slight bevel. I'm not going to try to go that slow and get a very harsh edge. But that works because they still have the shadows, they still have all of the other texture. It fits the rest of the style nicely. And so inside we've got just some casual shading here. One of my favorite things to look at in art styles is how they do the inside of ears, because there is so much room to experiment. I don't know why it is with human ears, but like, I guess we just don't use them as like something that we identify a person by naturally. So you can get away with a lot of creativity in how you draw ears. And I really love that. I really do. It's fascinating. I'm going to try to. I shouldn't do this with my real microns, and I shouldn't do it with these either, where I do take a fill and try to hatch it. No, but the point is not so much this little shading tangent, but now we have a useful reference. We've gotten a chance to study the ear. You have to draw the ear anyway. But it's a useful reference for us to carry over, so we're staying in proportion to this section here. Because we were very careful when we drew this piece that everything in it lined up with useful reference points in the existing drawing. So now, there's a chance it'll get a little off, but knowing that we don't have to go too much further with the hair and all of that, we can probably use this as a reference for the edge of the hair and not have to worry about trying to line up the hair and eyeball it all the way across the page. So let's see, we've got like a little piece there. Then we got this, which gently arcs outward. I'm just going to leave it kind of open-ended for now how far that arcs, because we will catch the lower piece here in a bit. It's a gentler arc than that. As much as I like the texture of this one, it's got some nice groove to it. And if this were you know, if I wasn't trying to do a specifically Frieren style study, I would say lean into that. Let's experiment with that more. But our goal here is, in this particular case, to try to get something that will actually look like the original. Once again, like when you're toying around with this in your own time, don't feel limited by doing that. Don't hold yourself to that. So you can see in this part where the hair is tied off, we get a slight stair step almost. Different hair chunks, not quite as defined by the large gaps as these, but you can tell by the silhouette edge. And so I'm going to just get each of these chunks basically. And let's see, we got a small one there starting to arc a little bit. And then this one is going into the actual arc at the top of the head. There we go. And this is a decent looking arc right now. It doesn't look immediately off proportion. That's one way to tell if you've gotten off the mark when you're way off in the distance. Specifically at the top of the head, I find for me this reveals a lot because it's distant from everything. You can tell if you've gotten off the mark if you converge the head and it looks really bad. It usually means some of your proportions back down earlier are where it's actually off and you'll have to shift stuff around a little bit. Digitally, pretty easy to do. Pen and paper, not so much. But we're not done with these just because we've added them here. First off, let's look at our line weight. A few of these are definitely heavier weight, and almost all of them participate in that sort of line, the hatching line clustering we were talking about. You have the stair step, and then there's 2 or 3 little extra hatches with it. These lower ones actually have a little bit more even, with the shadows. Some deeper lines in the middle, and then a few extra here. Yep, there we go. And then this, we can't even tell the line weight of the silhouette because of the extremely dark background. But generally looking at other references and other parts in this, it's not going to be very heavy. Okay, let's see. This also has a couple. Pardon me. And again, apologies for the coughing. Don't y'all worry, this will be a fairly short one. So, you'll be able to pick up at the next one, and, well, it'll be tomorrow. So, I've had this for a week now, and it's been getting slowly better, but I can't promise it'll be better by tomorrow. So we'll just keep on plugging away. Y'all will get gravelly voice Siph streams, and we will go from there. Okay. Now, you may have wondered why I did the outline of the face, and then I immediately went to side details. There's a couple reasons for that. One of them is, especially if you're doing something visibly and publicly, like this, you know, streamed and video recorded tutorial, the hair is often more distinctive, especially in manga and anime characters, so getting those first helps immediately make it recognizable. So if you're doing this live or demonstrating, it's not a bad place to start, because people will get excited earlier. The other reason, though, is that there is more... I would say that getting the facial features lined up correctly is generally trickier and requires a lot more precision than some of the other parts. And so the more reference points you have available to do that, the better. So I like to go ahead and get the bangs, get the chin and, like, neck and clothes and everything, so I have a lot of different points that I already know are lined up well. Well, we make sure of that before we go forward. But once those are set, it gives you a lot more to work with when you're trying to line up the actual face. Because eyeballing the eyeballs, unfortunately, is really hard. Because your brain is like, okay, eyes and center of face. Maybe like here, and like mouth and nose, and that's clearly not right. But even when you know a little bit with foreshortening and stuff, it's still very easy to get the positioning off. Be it foreshortening or proportions or angles, studying faces, it's very easy to get those off. So, I would say, for myself, who is still very much just an intermediate artist, I don't pretend to be a master here, and especially to any beginners, unless you're doing like a full-on structure early on, where you're doing, like, I talked about the Loomis head and Proko's methods, and some of the other options that are there, which I am doing a terrible job of representing here, but those tell you exactly where facial features need to go. You can get the alignments on those, like, right out the gate, and immediately have them in the right place. But if you're just doing something where you're studying the style, and you're not building on one of those structures, then you're going to have a very hard time just trying to guesstimate where the facial features go, and so it's useful to have these references. I always end up doing these funky little tangent faces. I like them, though. This little dude will just be over here for now. And we will keep on drawing Fern. So, speaking of references, before I jump in to the face, we'll do a few more other details. We still got about half of our time remaining. Pardon? Okay, so this is going to be an interesting one because lining it up with the chin is a very soft edge, and that's always difficult. We've also got the hair slightly off-center, which we'll have to remember for our future alignments. It looks like this is about the same height as that initial line, so we will use that as our sort of visual reference. This has a very slight upward slant, and this one is coming out just to the past the point of the chin. Slight arc to it, and then coming back. And I like things like this because it's just a lot of simple straight lines, which, for the record, is not actually easy to draw, but I find it's very fun to kind of freehand. For me, at least, that's the kind of lines that I enjoy just, like, running with. Because they're not exactly straight. They follow, like, the sort of bends and folds of the fabric a little bit. There's a little bit of interesting contour. So, pardon, I'm going to drink a little more water here in just a second. But it gives you a little more wiggle room to kind of do interesting motions and kind of have fun with that. And I find that some of the fun, especially with ink drawing, is kind of letting the motion of the pen take control. Digital doesn't quite get it as well, but it's got a bit of that energy. Okay, let's hope that drinking that water maybe softened the voice just a little bit. I'm not going to turn into the Grinch just yet. Let's see. But like these sort of free, like, folding lines, like, they do need to make sense with the fabric, but you have a lot of wiggle room with where they land. Then we got kind of these blocks of the stripes on Fern's outfit, which, once again, keeping a mental note of where the cheek is, which we've arced out too much, which is not a surprise. We can try to adjust that slightly. We don't want to mess it up too much from the original reference at this point. It really ought to be more of a subtle and then inward like that, perhaps. As opposed to, like, outward and then in. Just starts out almost straight down, but angled slightly, and then arcs in. There's an art to that I still have not mastered, and I suspect I will continue to not master it until I do more face practice. But don't y'all worry, we won't make you sit through that on this style study. So I'm just going to go ahead and get a loose edge of where this line is here. Pardon me. Jeepers, I really am sounding bad. I am sorry about that. Hey May, how are you doing? Sorry, I've got a little cold, so you may not want to sit and listen too long. But we're doing a Frieren style study. Some fun times. I love the art you threw into the Discord server, by the way. That looked really awesome. Okay, trying to line this up with the edge of the outfit here that we've established. There we go. And this one kind of connects up here with the bangs and is a fairly consistent width. There we go. So that is the hair basically lined up. Obviously, we don't have all of the details in here yet. And we can get some of these, again, line clusters going on in here. Got this little section in there. And then we've got some interesting shading. This is some of the only very heavy hatching. And the most likely reason for that is because it's needed to provide contrast against the face. The face is very bright. You don't want the hair over distracting it. You want to make sure that this hair is clearly in the background. So we're adding much heavier shading there. So it's got good contrast and it's very clearly behind. And because you see it lightens up as it gets further away. Which is, of course, fitting for an actual shadow, but is also very fitting for its function in this particular pose. So we've got that. Pardon me. And let's go ahead and get some of these ones too. Once again, we've got the slightly denser shading over here to show that it is somewhat in the dark, somewhat in the background, but it is not anywhere near as heavy as we're getting right here. Because it needs to be lighter to contrast that extremely dark background. Hey, they're pretty awesome conceptual pieces. Like, there is something awesome when even your, like, concepting stage and that sort of art that you're more experimenting with is still looking, like, really nice and clean. It's a place that I'm hoping to get to. My doodles, I am always underwhelmed with my doodles. Like, my finished pieces I'm pretty happy with, stuff I put a little time into, but, like, stuff where I'm just trying to get, like, a concept across always ends up really messy still. One of those things where studying structure like this can be potentially useful. And just time, of course. Okay, so I'm going to look at this relative to the chin, because I know our bangs are slightly off here. Height-wise, we want it to be slightly lower than this, actually. Lines up with right this intersection of our first two lines. Vertically, we don't trust the bangs, because we know those are slightly off, so we'll instead use the chin, and it's just past, so it's roughly over here and roughly here. A very faint nose line, and we have our first facial reference point. Mouth is slightly above the halfway between that and the chin, and it arcs up. Pardon. No, I don't want to cut the layer, I want to undo. There we go. And we've got this one there, and arcing up. Now, it looks like it might be a little bit high, which could be to our initial face silhouette, but I would also throw out there to hold off on making corrections when you're at this point, unless it's really obvious, because oftentimes you kind of need to get the whole face in there to see how it all comes together. You have to trust the process a little bit. If you go and make too many corrections right now, you'll get the eyes in there and be like, oh wait, actually maybe that wasn't as off as I thought. Oops. At least I find that often happens. The other reference I want to get in here for the face before we do the eyes, because those are going to be the big ones. We can move the nose and mouth around a little bit. We can adjust the face silhouette a little when we get to that. But the eyes are going to be a big deal. So let's get the eyebrows in first, because we have a lot of good references for those. Height-wise, it's slightly above these initial ear lines. It starts just on this side of the bangs, or at least this big long bang hair chunk here. And it's arcing over roughly to there. Hello! Welcome, Steamed! Thank you for dropping in. We're just doing some Frieren style studies. I apologize for my voice today, it's a little rough. Oh, one of these spam bots? Yeah. Well, one can dream. I thought it was a little sus. We will just be removing that. Deleted from chat. Yep. Usually when someone jumps in and follows before they say anything, it's one of those folks. So, oh well. No real problem there, to be honest. Just mildly annoying. This is roughly at the nose, and it arcs up slightly knowingly. Getting the actual angle of the eyebrows is important because they're very expressive. That's not unique to this style, but it is very, very specifically important on Fern, because she tends to not express much other than with the eyebrows and eyes. Leans towards more stoic expressions. Let's see. Okay. We'll do a save. We've got a little more time here. I do apologize. My voice is definitely starting to give out at this point, so we'll go as long as we can. Let's see. Real pencil brush and marker brush. Ooh. Oh, that'll be nice. I may have to... I need to keep exploring more brushes. Like, I love trying new tools in, like, physical media, and, like, I just haven't found the same spark or, like, the nicest ones in digital. And you don't need magical tools to do, you know, good digital art. But sometimes it's nice. Okay, so this eye. Height-wise, we're looking roughly where the bangs meet, and vertically the bangs have been pretty reliable. We're going to start something right there. And we've got... I've zoomed in slightly too much to see the eyebrows. Okay. Good, that tracks. It's roughly to about here. That also tracks chin-wise. So we've got this. Pretty solid stroke here. And then a slight tapering flare here, where it tapers out into a couple of different fins. Once again, we've got a little edge there. One thing you'll notice with artists is oftentimes every single character they draw has a different eye style, at least to the main cast. And you can get a lot of variance in those. Like, some artists are very consistent, but oftentimes even fairly realistic art styles will have a huge variance. I love that. It's different from the ears in that people often just figure out a way to draw ears that's entirely their own, but then they just stick with it. Eyes, there's a lot of flexibility with eyes. Okay. Once again, I'm trying to get all these. We've got kind of like the little flares up top, but not a lot of them. Those are slightly too big and too widely dispersed. And we do have a little bit of an eyelid line here. And like even like a small one up here under the bangs. Okay, and then we've got the actual sort of iris here. Oh yeah, I feel like you can do almost anything for ears. I mean, that's why the whoever it was who made Simpsons, it's all the Simpsons ears are like, or at least Homer's are his initials. Like, you can just do letters, you can do whatever. I love it. You'd be surprised how much flexibility there is on eyes as well, but like, it's like, you can make a believable eye in almost any shape. Like, you could just do a triangle and like emphasize the right parts and you'll get something that is plausibly an eyeball. Not necessarily a naturalistic one, but like, even so. That's also part of why the Among Us eyes work so well. I'd believe it. I would absolutely believe it with your style. Eyes are a really nice, like, signature in art, too. Among Us eyes. And yet they work, because you've got the reflection. In this case, it looks like they're tearing up a little bit. And the iris, like, it works. Not in the Frieren style, per se, but fun. But yeah, when you're doing a style study, definitely, like, look at a bunch of different characters' eyes and how the artist draws eyes. Because it's almost always a very central part of the style. Let's see, this looks almost continuous with the inner edge of this. This little tab here, almost continuous down with the rounded bottom of the iris here. Oh, it's slightly more vertical than that. It's more egg-shaped almost. And we've got these flaring out. And it's pretty dark. There's a slight gradient. Unfortunately, this picture is a little bit low res. We're going to go for a full fill for this top half here. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah, I can believe that. I feel like a lot of people, the hair is where it starts. Because it's easy to make definitive, recognizable hair. And I don't mean that it's literally, like, easy, no effort, but it's, like, an obvious focal point, so it's easy to get people to pay attention to it. And it's certainly where I've spent too much of my early study time focusing. But eyes are fun. But we've made this one too small. Yeah, that's not a surprise. Partly because I'm admittedly just a hair out of it today. And we got the initial proportions a little bit off with this one. But there are easy fixes for that. Because we can still use our ear as a good reference point. Height-wise, we're lined up roughly with the top. Bottom-wise, coming in roughly there. That's much more correct. and eke this over just a hair as well. And then we'll get that second one in there, and we'll work on the facial outline to tweak a little too. Oh, yeah, line art definitely the way to go for animations. Painterly animations are amazing, but they're a whole separate deal. Okay, this Fern is looking even more smug than our reference. Partly because we've got the tilt on the top a little too extreme. Sorry about that. Yeah, hopefully this is not the video that goes viral on YouTube. Because people would be disappointed when they got to our normal content. I'm going to go a little faster on this one and get the rough shape in, and then we'll make sure the alignment's right before we do the full details. Noting, though, that this is not exactly a mirror image of the other eye. The shape is different, the alignment of the iris is different. Even using a mirror tool or a copy and paste would not get you the effect that you're looking for with this. Yep. How jeepers. Pardon me. Let's do a little bit of fixing of that. Yeah, and that makes sense that you'd focus on the head. I mean, especially with like a singular art piece, or especially like a painterly piece, like that makes sense as a character focal point. Like that's where the expressions are going to be. That's where a lot of the distinctive characteristics are going to live. Like, absolutely. But yeah, once you're doing animations and stuff, it's definitely a different balance. Funny, this particular song sounds almost more like something out of Undertale. Doing these scribble shadings on a vector layer always makes me antsy and cause lag if I'm not careful. Go ahead and darken this one out a lot too, though. I'll leave some edges, but we'll mostly get it dark. So we're getting the mood, but it's a little bit too overzealous and too tilted back. But let's work back on we'll return to the beginning. Got our edge here. Have our edge mostly curve in and down. Steeper point in. Once again, edge of chin is roughly here at the collar. We've got our reference point there. This will aim towards the ear. We've got our reference point there. We'll lose some of this extra room there, and we'll get the nose and mouth now that we've got some other references. Nothing's ever set in stone. You can always tweak and readjust. Yeah, I can totally see not wanting to do line art for that reason. I've always been very technical myself. Like, it has taken a lot of effort to not, like, to let go, basically, and allow more, like, freeform art drawing stuff. I like the technical more. But I find that when I'm actually, like, doing the art, I enjoy the freeform stuff more. I just, like, sort of naturally am drawn towards the technical drawing for some reason. Which is so funny. Like, I don't know why. Because the results aren't necessarily better, so... Alright, let me grab another layer here and we'll throw in some quick shading. Go ahead and grab some the heavy ones for here. This is normally when I break out my like 0.7 micron. And just kind of go to town. Is this also, once you get some of the shadows in, it does also cover up some straight lines in this particular case. Obviously, you can always go through and do sharper lines and clean that up. 1 second. Okay, there we go. That should be better again. Sorry about all that. Let's see if we can't get through to the end of this. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I don't think we're going to need all 10. And some of these heavy shadows in here. Always good for the high contrast. Let's see. And I often like to re-emphasize especially heavy hatching too. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up at a 10 this time. Partly that's my normal time, and partly because like my voice is really giving out. I'm still definitely a bit sick, unfortunately. And while it's done a pretty good job of not getting in my way day to day, it's not great for the monologue that is streaming. Or the dialogue, or, you know, however many logs. I guess that depends on how big chat is, but in any case, I'm running on fumes at this point. Zoom out our reference a little bit because I know, yep. Oh yeah, we never actually did finish out the clothes in that direction. Well, that's fine. That particular shoulder is not terribly relevant to the overall illustration in this case. You can kind of just get the feel for it. Because this brush was probably not designed to be used at this size, but that's okay. It'll do for our purposes here. Oh yeah, and then it's just like solid dark, pretty much beyond the silhouette in all other directions. So work with that. We've got a little bit of a light happening here, but we don't necessarily need to capture that in this case. May clean it up a little for the thumbnail and so on, but that's a whole separate can of worms. Okay. We'll grab one more layer. We're going to go light transparency on this one. And we'll get just like a very soft gray going in these. One thing you'll notice with Fern, and this is relevant to the style studies especially, is Fern in particular has a gradient in her hair most of the time, not just a light and shadow one. Sorry, but sort of a top to bottom gradient too. So we'll try to capture that a little bit in here. But in this case, all of it has some level of shading, so we'll definitely want to capture that. I have to be very careful about not lifting the pen, or else this is going to cause all kinds of weird seams. Oh, hey, Scopic, how are you? We're just about to wrap up, actually. Yeah, this one's not my best work. I'm a little under the weather, but I think we've had some good insights into matching the style. Oh yeah, you're a VIP. We finally had enough followers, and so I just threw some names in there. May, you're here enough. I probably ought to make you a VIP too at this point. basically just a badge you can give folks who show up a lot. So yeah. Bit of fun. Someday we'll be able to get, like... Well, we'll see. Theoretically, like, stream emotes and stuff like that, and, like, actual... a little more that we can work with there in icons and stuff. But for now, VIP is at least a bit of fun. I forgot I'd done that. I did that before the holidays. We'll clean up our edges a little bit. Keep the texture. I'm using the same brush. I'm just drawing in transparency, basically. That way, the edges roughly match what the pen stroke edges have been looking like normally. Whoops, wrong layer. There we go. And then with our gray, I can, like, go just a hair darker. Hair darker. Terrible pun. I apologize. I don't actually apologize. Terrible puns are absolutely one of my favorite things in the world. No regrets. We'll continue to make terrible puns. And we'll just kind of give this, like, a little bit of gradient to it. Not a ton, mind. Just enough to match the original, of course. Without necessarily needing to get into all the gradient tools. Some of these ones are a little darker back here, so I'll even get them just lightly in this darkest one. These two as well. Hi, everybody's showing up. Well, thank y'all for dropping by. We've got about 5 minutes left on the stream. Because my voice is giving out, so I probably can't do much more than 5 minutes. Oh yeah, Fern is a lot of fun. I would recommend Frieren. I've not quite captured it, but I think we're at least catching some of the style well, so... When I'm not, you know, trying to not... binoculars. When I'm not fighting my own voice, we'll be able to do more in-depth ones, hopefully next week. But, for the meantime, we've at least got this nice Fern study. Now, if we really want to do this right, I would, let's see. Well, I mean, we could just do this. It's going to mess with the hair a little bit, but, and the face. We'll have to clean that up. I'll just do a background layer instead. That'll be easier. Okay. See if the fill tool's going to play nice. Could be worse. We'll do a little cleanup for the actual video thumbnail and all that jazz, but yeah, I think we're just about there for this one. I've got a lot more Frieren references available, so hopefully over the next couple of weeks we'll be able to do more of those and get more in depth. And then we'll jump into some new styles. Because I have picked up some new manga and anime that I'm enjoying, so hopefully we'll be able to do some studies on them too. But in the meantime, I am gonna have to wrap it up for the night. Thank y'all for jumping in. I do appreciate it. But yeah, my this is just gonna be like an hour-long coughing fit if I go much longer. So I'm gonna have to call it here. But y'all have a good one. And whatever time it may be for anyone watching this on YouTube, be it morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is, I hope y'all have a good one. See y'all on the flip side. I'm glad I'm sounding better. Bit by bit, we'll get there.